Okay, well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back here again for this presentation. I'm not sure where the year went, but it's definitely been quite a fast one as well as quite a challenging one to work through. So just to go over, what I'd like to do is give an overview. We had an international blueberry and cranberry meeting here in Nova Scotia as well as in Prince Edward Island in late August, so I can go over some of the highlights associated with that, especially since we've got a few extra minutes. And in that, they provided some excellent information on this, what's going on in the global sector. From a marketing perspective, more importantly, with respect to producing the crop. And so there's some important considerations that I think are going to be of interest to you as far as that's concerned. I will spend quite a bit of time looking at some of the changes that are going on with respect to disease management in the sector. It's one that's continuing to evolve and potentially could change quite quickly in the year ahead. And along with that, give some insight then into some of the stresses that are facing the blueberry system as well, whether it be environmental or on the biotic side, such as the disease issues. So when you look at the program over the past year, we've had some new faces come on board. So Emily Kirkpatrick has really taken a lead role, especially on the applied trials involving the screening of some of the pest control products that are that have potential for use in the industry. And we also have Ola or Ola, continuing his work. He started with us last October on the remote sensing side. Kenneth Vanku has dovetailed in with that, looked at some of the changes that are occurring with respect to the growth and development considerations of the blueberry plant, and especially with respect to some of the greenhouse gas issues and the ability of the plant to sequester carbon. So that's some of the work that's underway right now. And Sandra Murphy's helped with a lot of the administrative tasks on a week-to-week basis. So in essence, she's really helped keep the program moving forward and allow me to spend more time on the research side. And we have Naomi Jackal working on a disease management project looking at the effect of some of the biofungicides. And then we had a nice group of research interns this year. So we had Sydney Clare, co-op student from the main campus, Dal, Abby Fisher helped us out for a good portion of the summer, as well as Emma Brown and a few others as well. So when it comes time to look at the Vaccinium Symposium, we had considering all the challenges, excellent uptake. So we ended up having approximately 270 participants. It might even have been 300 when you look at the day-to-day participants from over 40 different countries. All the major blueberry players on the production side were there. So whether it be Fall Creek, Driscoll, Stoles, some from Hortifruit. So they all made it up to the Maritimes to attend in this meeting. So in total, we had around 200 oral presentations, approximately 70 or 68 or 70 poster presentations that occurred over the span of a week. And it really gave a good snapshot of what's going on the cranberry as well as the blueberry production sectors. Along with that, and something I'm looking forward to getting away from is I've been chair of the Vaccinium Working Group for the International Society of Horticultural Science the last few years. And what this has done is it's allowed you to really see who's doing the research on a global basis with respect to the production of the blueberries and some of the emerging issues that are associated with it. So here's the group as the meeting was finished up at the Prince Edward Island Convention Center. So it's a fantastic opportunity to showcase the wild blueberry sector to essentially to the world. But it's also something that I never want to do again either. A lot of challenges and a lot of work associated with it. Now, one of the things we tried to do with the symposium was bring in some of the key players. And so we had Court Brazelton, and Court wears several hats. The first being he's involved with the International Blueberry Organization, and they do an annual report, and I'll give some data from it in a few minutes. And he's also, I believe, he's also associated with Fall Creek Nurseries, and it was set up by his father, Dave Brazelton. and they're really the leading provider of wild blueberry plants on a global basis, right? So we had court participate first day of the meeting, and just to ensure that we made sure the cranberry sector was covered, we had Jeff Lafleur come in from Ocean Spray, as Vice President of the Grower Relations, provide an overview of their production system, some of the challenges that they're encountering as well. It provided some interesting insight into that portion of the blueberry sector. And perhaps one of the most interesting speakers that we brought in was Casey Cronquist from North American Blueberry Council. And he provided an excellent opportunity over the course of a week to give us insight into the state of the cultivated blueberry sector on a North American basis, and also some insight into how they're trying to contend with the increased supply of blueberries, not only on a North American basis, but also on a global side as well. And along with that, we had Leslie Wada also present an overview of their health research activities as well. So it was a really good meeting to gain insight into what's going on in the blueberry sector. And also along with that, we had Jim Olmsted come up from Driscoll's, and Jim looks after the global breeding program of Driscoll's. And what he provided insight are some of the trends that have been occurring over the last 20 years and where it's going. And to sum it up in a nutshell, it's very much signature varieties, larger berries, sweeter berries. Right. So along with that, over the year, because I've been the chair of the Vaccinium Working Species Working Group, I've also attended some other horticulture meetings, in particular significant berry ones, including the European Horticulture Congress, that was in Romania, and then more recently the PrimeSoft meeting, which really focused on some of the stresses facing berry production. Again, that was just a couple of weeks ago. It's been a busy year from that perspective. So some of the things that came up are when you're looking at blueberry production globally. So it's well over 4 billion pounds now. That's occurring globally. So when I started here in 1996, I think we were at less than 700 million pounds. So it's more than a fourfold increase in production. Fortunately, it's not going to slow down. When you look at the supply characteristics, it's fascinating how it's changing. So on the fresh market side, the low point in the supply is actually in our summer. Okay? And that just gives you insight into how things have changed. So there's a lot of supply that's coming on stream. As I've mentioned, there's more of an increase on the sweeter and the larger berries. And something that didn't come up, there's discussion yesterday was just what's the impact on the grower. They're substantial. There's a lot of stresses that they're having to contend with. And then also, because of more and more emphasis on these new varieties, there's upfront and ongoing fees. So there's license fees associated with buying some of these. And to give you an example of this, I was talking to some of the growers in the Netherlands and Belgium a couple of weeks ago. So upfront cost to get into this, $5,000 an acre, okay, just to be able to access these. And then there's an ongoing annual fee of $1,000 an acre after that. So really expensive proposition, trying to keep up with these new varieties. And along with this, number one issue that seemed to be a common thread, especially in the more southern or hotter production areas, is water availability and temperature stress, so drought stress. And so there's a lot of challenges. And I know we've had our challenges here as well, and they're definitely significant, but in these other areas, they're really substantial. I don't know what they're going to do. And so there's a lot of expansion going on, and this is out of the 2024 International Blueberry Organization report. It's accessible. You can just get it right online and have a read through it. Every year it's become a thicker and thicker document, so it's quite rigorous when you look at its explanation of what's going on. And some of the things that have come out of that report, as well as the North American side, is there's a lot of onus on, okay, well, how can the blueberry sector generate value? And along with this, and this is where it links in nicely with Craig's presentation, is how can you increase the production efficiency? And in particular, emphasis is on water usage, and then also labor, particular harvesting efficiency as well. And so to give you insight into what's occurring on the high bush sector, variety update, one of the cultivars that's really taken the sector there by storm is a new variety called Peachy Blue. And it's an interesting name. So it has a very up forward peach taste, and then it kicks back and gives you a typical high bush blueberry finish to it. And it's one that can grow in temperate areas that we have here. So it's what's referred to as a mid to high chill variety. But it is one of these new signature varieties. So to get it, there's a lot of upfront costs associated with it. So from the International Blueberry report from this past year, as I mentioned earlier, the production is now over 4 billion pounds. When you look at, well, where is it coming from? It's pretty clear that China is becoming a key player as far as the production of blueberries is concerned. And, you know, when you talk to some of the propagators, they say, well, there's uncertainty. No, there's no uncertainty when you talk to the consultants. The acres are going in the ground and the production is definitely ramping up. And so that's really increasing at an exponential rate. The United States, it's also continuing to increase. Peru's a major player, Chile. But what you'll notice is the Canadian high bush sector, it's continuing to kind of get bumped down further and further down the ladder. And I wouldn't put it beyond the realm of possibility it won't even be in the top 10 in a few years' time. So it's quite a change from where we were 10 years ago as far as the production aspects is concerned. Something else, just to make sure that you're aware of, is on the processing side. It's becoming far more than just a North American picture as far as the availability of processed berries is concerned. So it's now occurring Asia as well. South America continues to be a major supplier as well. But when you look at it, China in particular is really becoming quite a significant supplier of processed berries. Unfortunately, those really haven't crept into the international supply as of yet. It will remain to be seen what happens on a go-forward basis. So supply of processed berries continues to go up. Another thing when you're talking to some of these other growers of berries is they'll often remind you, look, blueberries they're an expensive fruit to produce. And when you compare it to a range of other fruit crops, whether it be apples, melons, citrus, whatever, generally there's only one group that's more expensive to grow, and that's the brambles, so blackberries and raspberries. Otherwise, blueberries are the next most expensive. You know, yes, apricots are there, but there's an ample supply of dried apricots. And then cherries, yes, it's presently more expensive, but they put a lot of emphasis on mechanization, especially in Western US. So that cost is coming down as well. So it's very much not only a global market of blueberry production, but also there's other fruit crops there that can also play quite an important role. So what does this mean? Well, on the wild blueberry side, making sure the world knows what we're about, how we're unique, how we're different, its advantages becomes even more important. Okay? And there's a fantastic story there, and it's just something that needs to continue on a go-forward basis. You know, we are significantly different when you look at the production of blueberries compared to the cultivated high bush sector, which consists of traditional northern high bush and now more recently the southern no-chill varieties. Okay, so definitely need to continue at plugging those differences on a go-forward basis. So let's get back to the business of the day, which is research and development activities. And so when you look at what we do within the research program, we try to assess new products as they come along. And this is something that we work quite closely with one of the major one of the major blueberry growers, so the Bragg Group, on that, just to make sure that, you know, these new technologies can come into stream and get assessed as quickly as possible, just given that we're in quite a competitive environment. Something that's also becoming more important on a go-forward basis is to look at the production system of the fruit, of the wild blueberry fruit. And one of the things about growing berries in a northern climate is our footprint, and especially considering, for the most part, we don't use much irrigation. And then the second thing is we don't have to plant the crop. The footprint comes way, way, way down. And so as far as the footprint is concerned, we did some initial work back 2005, 2007 or so, and this provided initial insight into the production system, and there's really a need to update it. It's a fantastic story when you compare it to other cropping systems, and it's something that we need to keep plugging away at. And along with that, when you look at the production system, it's not the same as an agronomic crop. It's a perennial, it's there. And as a result of this, I don't think it will ever be the same as a woodlot with respect to the ability to sequester carbon, but it needs to be documented as well. So this is one of the things that started up over this past year, is having another look at that again. And we're continuing work on a go-forward basis with that, as well as looking at the biodiversity and also some regenerative agriculture benchmarks as well. So quite a change from what we were working on 5-10 years ago. So give you an update on some of the things that are occurring with respect to the pest management products. It's always good to go back and just quickly review what's going on with respect to the MRLs. And so when we're using these pest control products, and it doesn't matter if it's a conventional fungicide or even a biofungicide, you do have the presence of residues that will be on the berry. And a maximum residue level is the highest level of a pesticide residue that's legally tolerated on the berry itself. And it needs to be in a window that's safe for consumers. And general rule of thumb is it's good to try to keep it as low as possible. And so when you look then at the assessment process with respect to MRLs, it's one that's really coordinated by Health Canada, and it's done in collaboration with other public sector entities on a global basis as well. And when you look at it, it's legally established, okay, and it's one that's tightly regulated under the Pest Control Products Act here in Canada. And so when you look at it, it is linked, okay, with the use of pest control products. And it's important to note, okay, that the label itself has been developed just so that the use patterns of a pest control product, for example, a fungicide, it provides the basis for the provision of a safe route for consumption in Canada. But it doesn't always necessarily provide the equivalent for some of the export markets. And that's why it's so important to make sure that you check with your processor just on, okay, is the product, is it okay to use? Is it accepted for use? And then also that no other problems will be encountered with it, just because there's so many different countries that are buying wild blueberries now. Okay. And so this is some information out of the North American High Bush Council. So on a year-to-year basis, they provide an update on some of the concern areas with respect to the pest control products. And so as you work your way down the list, you can see some of these export markets and the associated concerns that come up with them. We've run into some problems with a few of these over the years in the wild blueberry sector as well. So again, it just reiterates the importance of working with the end user on making sure these products are acceptable for use in the wild blueberry sector. Right? Narrow it down and look at some of the products that are in use across the sector. There is really only one that year in, year out, I'm always a little bit worried about in the use patterns, and that actually consists of prothioconazole. So we use it for monolinea blight. Yes, it's great also on the leaf disease side of things, but you really need to make sure you turn the tap off on Proline use going into bloom. Okay, and the reason for that is we only have 68, 80 days from full bloom to harvest. And once that berry starts to develop, it's going to be there at harvest, and you might run into some residual issues. So when you look at the MRL of prothioconazole, so the active in Proline and Sortel, it's quite low. And so the ability is present for it to persist and get picked up. So you need to be careful with the use of this product. All right, so the other aspect, which is a concern, and it's a situation that continues to evolve, and you know, it's not an emergency or a crisis, but just to be aware of is there's a lot of active ingredients that are under review right now in the European Union. And European Union is a major market for blueberries, for our wild blueberries. And actually, the majority of the fungicides are under review. And you can see the dates of their expiry for use in the European Union. So a large chunk of them are expiring. Now they might get extended, but there is some rumblings. And when you talk to some of the growers in Europe and you say, okay, well, any idea of what's going to happen? The best way to sum it up is they just don't know. And on our end, I think we just have to be prepared for the worst. And so that's another reason why we try to stay ahead with respect to the screening of new products. And just to give you an example of this, so when you look at it, this was prothioconazole, so the active in Proline and then also Sortel. There in the bottom, you can see its expiry period. And this is right off the EFSA website. And another example I thought I could include is this one, the pitomefructophin, and it's the active ingredient in Syngenta's product, so the Miravis. And the adepidin is the trade name of it. It's an excellent fungicide, and I wish we could use it from a disease management perspective, but it's still pending in Europe. And until we get this sorted out, unfortunately, we can't use it. And it's too bad because it's an excellent, particular botrytis product. All right, so when you then look at what's the scenario going into next year, at this point in time, not too many changes with respect to some of the fungicides that can get recommended. A couple of new entrants, so Maxentis, it's a combination of prothioconazole and azoxystrobin. It has a nice little use pattern, especially if you have some red leaf in the fields. It's a little more systemic than some of the other fungicides, so it helps from that perspective. And then the other one is Acevia, so a BASF product we've had on screening trials for quite a few years, and so it presently right now I think the label for it's botrytis suppression, but it's one that also has some potential with some of the other diseases as well. It's a good backup to have in case some of these products are deregistered in the European Union. Okay, so looking then at, well, what happened over the span of the past year, and so looking at the yield potential side, what I'd like to do is just quickly go over it, and I can't stress it enough. The best technology that we have going into this new cycle or this upcoming year is really it's walk the fields and use your eyes, and just take your time and know the products, the tools that are available to use, and proceed from there. There's no replacement for it. And so starting things off, the field history plays a very important role, especially with monolinea. We've been finding some of the primary inoculum sources have been dropping off in monolinea. I'll give you an example of this in a few minutes, but especially with the leaf diseases and Septoria spherulina, if you start seeing cankers in the field, in the sprout phase of production, that's your primary source of inoculum as well as potentially from the leaf litter as well. So walking those fields, keying in on some of these things becomes really important considerations. And then along with that, just be aware of what the physical environments, what are the weather conditions required for an infection period. And so there's temperature and wetness models, especially on the monolinea botrytis side that were developed by Rick Delbridge, Paul Hildebrand many years ago. Models are fantastic. They're still a good tool to use, along with knowing what the stage of the plant growth and development is. So looking at the leaf disease side, I don't think we need to spend too much time on talking about the damaging effects of whether it be spherulina, Septoria, or blueberry rust. Left untreated, the fields would just go pitch black. And you can see this with some of the screening trials we've done in the past. And the yield potential just melts away. So left unchecked, it's quite a quick way to lose your crop. And so with respect to the spherulina and the Septoria, it's really good to look at the fields, see if the cankers are present, look for the early symptoms of infection, And one of the big changes that have occurred in the past 10 years is look, the protectant fungicides, in particular the chlorothalonol, so the Bravo Echo. Those can't be used anymore. And as a result of that, we don't have as long a persistence window as what we used to have. And unfortunately, what that means is, although we try to come in with the best replacements possible, you run out of protection. Okay? And you just reiterates the need to keep monitoring the fields, and if necessary, look at potentially making an additional disease management application associated with it as well. The other thing from a rust perspective is it's lasting a lot longer in the season than what it used to. So cankers, they're fairly easy to pick out with respect to the septoria and the spherulina. What's interesting is when you look at, well, how do they get into the plant? And on the lower surface of the leaf is where the gateway is into the interior of the leaf. And whether it be spherulina, blueberry rust, or septoria, these little doorways provide the entrance. Okay? Very rarely do we see any infections blowing a hole in the cuticle of the blueberry leaf and going in that way. They're generally, and you can see it with these little threads, those are the fungal infection threads, they generally find that gateway and go in through the stomata, which are located on the lower surface of the leaf. And there's right from the lab, a microscope showing, in this particular case, this was septoria that worked its way into the interior of the leaf. And once inside the leaf, it's fair game for the fungus. It'll draw on the plant's resources, use the carbohydrates, also some of the soluble proteins, and just destroy the leaf in time. So brown threads here are the fungal growth and development activities that start to commence once it's inside the leaf. And so what it'll first appear as, especially with spherulina, are these really, really small water-soaked lesions. Gotta get this thing here that you can see here and there. They'll gradually increase in size over time with spherulina and septoria. With blueberry rust, it just looks like almost like the lower surface of the leaf has been sandblasted with these small water-soaked lesions. So these leaf spots will increase in size and proceed from there. Now, blueberry rust, it's by far the more damaging one. And so the challenge with it is it has alternate host. And it's the alternate host is hemlock. And this is where the dangerous part of the disease occurs, so the sexual reproduction stage. And so the pathogen itself is Coppsora minima. It's one that we've had here in the province. I'm sure we've had it as long as I've been here. So we started, I remember first field season of Fox Point, came across a few occasions of it, and then it seemed to really start to escalate once we got into the early 2000s. And it's also one that can bounce to other ericaceous plants, so such as cranberries, whatever, and this sort of thing. And it can quickly regenerate and explode once it's present within the field. And so when you look at where it started to emerge elsewhere, as mentioned earlier, we started to see it here in Nova Scotia in the mid-90s, South Africa, Australia, South America, and Europe. It spread pretty much globally everywhere. Okay, so it's quite a prevalent disease. Interesting, we sent some spores off to a lab, USDA lab, and they said, okay, that's interesting. Here's how it relates to all the others. And then the other thing they did with the new molecular tools is they said, oh, by the way, it's only been around 3 million years. So it gives you some insight into how this organism has been present. And then more importantly, in the last 20 years, how quickly it's just become quite a concern, okay, with respect to the damage it causes to the blueberry. So that was enough molecular. Let's get back then to the important things within a field. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the dangerous part of the process is what's happening with the alternate host, so the hemlock. Okay, and this is the sexual reproductive spot or part. And so what happens is the teleospores in the blueberries, they'll produce the spores that'll infect the hemlock. Hemlock goes through the sexual reproductive process. You have teleospores being produced, work its way back to the blueberry, and then quickly the process escalates. And this is what we start to see in particular, I would say by late July, early August, and in some cases even earlier than that, okay? And so with rust, it doesn't take very long to have complete defoliation within a field once it starts. And I was hoping to actually show you what kind of the progression of things. So left unchecked, this is what you'll see with, so you won't have hardly any floral buds in an area such as this. One application where you can really cut down on the canker numbers, and you'll start to see one or two floral buds on a consistent basis. And this was just out from the research center yesterday. It shouldn't have been so, should have focused a little bit more on getting some clear pictures. And then as you go up to two applications, you'll see that your floral bud numbers start to increase a little bit more as well. So what are the implications of this compared to 10 years ago? 10 years ago, Valdincinia was very much of a concern. We don't generally see it as much in fields as what we used to. So fortunately, that's out of the equation for the most part. We do have the Septoria and the Spherulina. It's a slow progressing disease. It can cause some damage to the leaves and then open the path for really significant rust problems. And we saw this in quite a quick emergence of blueberry rust. But the nice thing 10 years ago is we had the protectants. So Bravo in particular, and we found combining it with Proline gave you a nice long window of protection. And you could get away with one. And if you needed to follow it up, well, occasionally you might help putting a second application of a fungicide on. Now, however, what we're seeing is because the plants are growing for a longer period of time, we've been seeing ongoing rust infections occurring well into October. So the spores just keep infecting the leaves. And so left unchecked, you'll have the rust come in. And the rust is a little bit different compared to some of the other leaf spot diseases. It not only chews up the leaf area, but it also keeps the plant in a vegetative state. So it messes up the formation of the floral buds, which is another thing why it's a bit of a hidden danger from a plant growth and development perspective. So unfortunately, we're in a scenario as a result of the loss of the protectants, the longer window in which these diseases are present. You are in a scenario where probably multiple fungicide applications are going to need to occur. But again, we do have exceptions. So a couple of years ago, we had an incredibly dry September, early October. Well, if you go out and you don't see any symptoms of new infection, don't apply the fungicide, right? So it's just, we're careful monitoring. Continue is going to be probably the best tool in managing these spot diseases, especially when we're in a cost competitive environment. All right, so what we find is just given the breakfast of diseases that are present, first application, we tend to see the best control with Provia as well as with the Proline. Most likely ongoing or multiple fungicide applications may be required. When you look then at what's to be expected by coming in with an additional fungicide application, and this is based on 2023 going into 2024 yield data. It's easily a 20% yield reduction by just relying on that one application. And if you do have problems with red leaf, the Maxentis, as I mentioned before, with the azoxystrobin in it, which is a little bit more mobile in the plant, it's a tool that may work well for you as well. So that finishes up the sprouts. And what I'd like to do on the crop year side is just quickly go over another scenario that we saw this year. So early on, my initial expectations were, well, we didn't really have much of a monolinear window. But then again, when Emily actually charted out the infection periods, there was a lot of them. And yet we really didn't see as much monolinear issues as what we have in prior years. And so I think what's happening is the primary inoculum source within the field is we're knocking it down as a result of using a little bit more thorough disease management program. So on the monolinear side, it's one that continuing to use the three-step process, it's going to continue to play a pretty important role. The one that caught me a little bit off guard this year not so much by the severity of damage it caused, but by more the location. So the spread in which we found botrytis, we've never seen anything like it. We found it, it used to traditionally be more of a coastal issue. Well, just about in every field we could find it this year. And so it is going to continue to be an ongoing issue with it. And it's one that also requires careful monitoring as well. And especially when you look at, well, what happened this past year? Well, we had minimal frost in the ground during the winter. That also kind of related to minimal snow cover. Snow was all gone. And then we had this blast of heat come on when the plants were in bloom. And so what this then resulted in was significant. So we had an incredible bloom, short period of time, and you have all this floral debris. And as a result of that, it provides just an ideal environment for botrytis. So you got more soft tissue that's just a powder keg for botrytis than what we've had in previous years, where instead of having a 3-week window, you might only have a 10 to 15 day. So really important from that perspective as well. Okay, so it's something to also be aware of. So as far as the botrytis is concerned, again, traditionally it's one that does well in damp, cool weather. Problem with it is it's very, very prolific. In as little as 8-9 hours under ideal environmental conditions, you can have an infection event occur. It's one that can bounce from other vegetation, whether it be sheep sorrel or brambles that are present in the field or along the side of it. And again, the problem is our flower densities have gone up, or the floral densities have gone up. So we've got over 150 million flowers that are sitting there in a susceptible stage. And so if you just went by the calendar with what we have from the start of monolinia to the end of botrytis, in theory, you might need 5 fungicide applications. Please don't take a picture of this. This isn't what I'm trying to convey at all. It's not sustainable. I know it. So gets back to what we talked about before. So again, just go back to the basics. Check, hey, is it sporulating in the case of monolinia? Is it at a susceptible stage? And so, in the spring, one of the toughest things, you want to get going, you want to get the field sprayed. But unless there's green tissue that's there in significant amounts for monolinia, it's not going to be at a susceptible stage for infection. There's no way that fungus can go through those scales on a floral bud. Okay, so just make sure that it's at the right proper stage of as far as the plant growth and development is concerned. And again, go back to those predictive models. Have a look at it. Say, okay, did we have a wetness duration of 4 hours, in which case it's no problem, or 20 hours where you got a big problem? And so just go through the process of using those. And instead of using those 5 calendar applications, if you just go by the label of a pest control product, hopefully you can cut it back to, 1, if you have a nice dry bloom, maybe 2 if you have a botrytis window or some wet weather during botrytis. But again, they're your best friend with respect to being able to cut back on disease management applications. All right, so really important to monitor, and satisfactory control with botrytis is a little bit different from monolinia. You need to get it on before an infection event's occurred, just given it's such a problematic fungus. And strains, again, there's a lot of resistance with botrytis. So there's isolates in our fields that have resistance now to 5 different modes of action. Okay, so it's something to be aware of as well. And so the importance of using good botrytis products with multiple modes of action, those are going to continue. And along with that as well, the biofungicides have a definite fit as well, both with respect to what they can do from a disease management perspective, and then also with some of the export market considerations as well. The Bacillus series of these biofungicides, it doesn't matter if it's Serafil, double nickel, Saronade, and there's lots of others. They're really focused on this Bacillus subtilis, and then it's been also reclassified to Bacillus millilifaciens. Okay, so it's a soil bacteria that does a really nice job of suppressing the botrytis presence within a field. There are other biofungicides, and one that used to be called Fracture, it's now being marketed as ProBlad by Bartlett's. It also has a fit, and we just need to get that figured out in a little bit more detail. And the reason why these become important from a production stream perspective is, well, when you look at, well, yes, we have a conventional stream of blueberries, but we also have residue-free, and then we also have organic streams. And so knowing these tools and how they fit in the mailbox, or in the toolbox rather, becomes a really, really important consideration, okay, on a go-forward basis. So with Ceraphil, it's really perhaps the farthest along with respect to the work that we've done on it. It really it has some interesting modes of action. So it's going to produce metabolites that'll hinder the growth and development of the fungus. So that's the first thing. It's going to compete with space, so it's going to mop up any residues that are present on the leaf surface that the fungus would otherwise feed on. And then the other aspect with it is it's going to kind of spread itself out and compete for space as well. So it has this kind of these 3 steps of protection that it provides to the blueberry plant. And then the other thing that we're finding, and this is one of the work that Naomi Jackal is doing, is it also, we think, stimulates the plant's defense mechanisms. So that's work that's ongoing. But just to give you an idea, when you look at botrytis control, and this is from 2021 data, what we're finding is, yes, the conventional fungicides work, and we've been finding this in it's a little bit more apparent in the last couple of years. But when you combine the Maravon with the Ceraphil, you get a little better protection because you're bringing in these different modes of action. So a bit of a stacking of protection that's provided compared to just a conventional fungicide. Okay, and this is going to become important if some of the active ingredients, especially one of the ones in Switch, if it is not re-registered in Europe. So keeping an eye on it, and this just backs up again the need to keep moving forward with these products. And then as far as impact on harvestable yield, we see a nice bump up in berry yields with respect to this as well. And so it's definitely worth keeping an eye on from that perspective. The last thing, perhaps the most interesting that I'd like to just go over with you, is when we're looking then at the process, what happens as you transition from a blueberry flower to the berry itself. And when you look at it, just to go over some of the background knowledge that's been known for many, many years. So blueberry clones, for the most part, are self-incompatible. They're going to need pollen movement occurring from a different clone, so a different plant in the field. They're self-incompatible. You can't take pollen from the same flower, put it on a stigmatic surface, and in most cases expect to get a berry out of it. It's just not going to happen. So that's the first thing. Second thing, when you look at blueberry pollen, it's large, they're tetrads, they're large, they're sticky, and it's one that is not going to move around by wind. So you need a vector. And so some form of pollinator is going to be required. So don't want to get into that. Just wanted to when you do the math, so a good sized blueberry has 50 to 70 seeds in it. Okay, to get a seed, you're going to need a pollen grain to germinate, work its way down through the stellar canal, fertilize the ovary and the ovules that are situated within it, and start generating those seeds. So when you tally that up, that works out to over 1 billion pollen grains that have to move around within that field in a short period of time. So it's like a massive movement that's going to be required because our flower densities are so high. So it's not uncommon now to have more than, excuse me, 100 million flowers per acre. Okay, so how can you do that? Well, yes, the pollinators are going to be very important, but there's another tool that's part of this process that might be worth having a look at. And the importance of this becomes even more apparent when you look at what's happening to our growing season. So we don't have the snow cover, not much frost in the ground, and there just isn't as much difference with respect to what used to be early ground versus late. And a good example of that is, again, it's up along Parsborough Shore. We used to consider that late ground. Well, not anymore. So some really interesting changes. Another way of looking at it, And this is from a fruit production perspective is a little bit more interesting. So when you look at some of the common fruit crops that are out there, so peach, so stone fruit, okay, how many seeds does it have in it? One, right? So in theory, one pollen grain and you're done. Well, as you work your way up to apple, it can have 10 to 12 seeds, strawberry 200, cranberry 4 to 19. And as I mentioned earlier, our blueberries have typically between 35 and 70 seeds per berry. And so when you look at, well, what's that providing? In our case, it's tough, right? Because so for each seed, you're only getting 0.09 grams of incremental value from that seed. And what the seeds are doing is they're doing the legwork with respect to producing these hormones that stimulate the maternal tissue surrounding that seed, so within the berry, that give you its girth and then give you, at the end of the day, the berry. And so the long and short of this is you need a lot of seeds to get a decent sized berry. And it's a direct linear relationship. If you want a nice 0.6, 0.65 gram sized berry, you're going to see that there's approximately 70 berries in it. And as a result of this, pollination and the use of pollinators becomes quite an important consideration. And so to look at what's happening in that berry, so at bloom, and after you have pollination, fertilization's done. In a 2-week span, you're going to have all the cell division that is going to happen in that berry is done. And from that point in time on, it's just typically cell expansion. And as a result of this, the presence of the seeds and their ongoing generation of these hormones to give the plant, the berry its girth and its weight become a really, really important consideration. And so when you look at, okay, well, what's doing that from a hormone perspective? And you have really 3 major categories. So you have your gibberellins, the cytokines, the auxins. The one that's doing the bulk of the work are the gibberellins. Okay? They're what's responsible for increasing in cell girth as far as that's concerned. The cytokinins, they'll help give you some cell division, but the bulk of the work is being done by the gibberellin compounds. Okay? And so 68, 80 days later, berries ripe to be, the berries ready to be harvested. And so in the grape sector, they have this phrase called veraison, which is the softening of the berry. We have the same thing in the blueberries, and it's really from this point onwards that the plant starts to accumulate sugar. And this is also where having the presence of a healthy canopy becomes an important consideration. And the plant itself, it's generating ethylene to help the process, but it's nowhere near as strong a climacteric food as apples, bananas, and this sort of thing. But when you take a cross section of the berry, this is what you'll see. So the seeds are small, and we need a lot of them to get a decent size seed in it, or a decent sized berry. So really, since I've started here, I've been looking at the use of these plant growth regulators. Started in the late 90s. We focused on GA3. Yield effects were all over the place. Some years a little bit, other years nothing. And it was awfully hard to try to figure out, okay, what in the world's going on? And so after the bad frost of 2018, we really picked this up again. Said, okay, well, were we looking at the wrong category of gibberellins? And the answer to that is yes. For whatever reason, the wild blueberries, they seem to do better with a little different analog. So the GA4 and 7 groups. And this is available, and it's used in other fruit sectors. And so we looked at a few different types. So the Novagib, Perlan, as well as Provide. And in the case of the Perlan, it also had the cytokinin in it, okay, that I mentioned before as well. And then we looked at a commercial cytokinin compound, which really didn't do a whole lot for us. So timing is we tried to hit it at full bloom, so right after the flowers have opened, and then come in 10-day, 2 weeks later. And as far as the effects, we've had a few years of this now. What you can notice is, first, compared to an untreated control, we are getting a bit of a lift with respect to the use of these plant hormones. So these are naturally occurring plant hormones that can be found in the blueberry plant anyway. So all we're really doing is just giving it a bit of a lift and help stimulating that maternal tissue surrounding that surrounding the seeds that are in the berry to give you that little extra berry size. So with the use of these compounds, we are seeing a lift. We're also seeing a stimulation with just the fungicide, so the Maravon, and we were actually also using switch in this trial anyway, just to make sure that it wasn't a disease issue. But the ethylene inhibitory aspects of the Maravon come through, and this helps also keep the leaves on the plant post-bloom. But overall, we're seeing a bit of a yield increase with respect to it. The one treatment provided, we put it on too high a concentration, and then we saw a yield drop. But overall, we were seeing an increase. And then the other thing is you have the nice thing compared to some other fruit sectors, timing isn't as important. I would say after full bloom, so mid-bloom is a good window to come in and potentially use these products. Now, we do need to get them registered if they are to be used as a plant growth regulator. They are available in some of the liquid fertilizer concentrations at lower concentration, at lower levels. So it is possible to look at their use that way, but we do need to look at label expansions. So you can't presently use these commercially in wild blueberry production. But nonetheless, they help what's occurring in that blueberry plant anyway, in particular as far as the berry growth and development activities is concerned. And we are seeing some increases in yield. And so, for example, if you go back into the 1970s, 1980s, production of red delicious apples, it was a cornerstone of the production system to give you that nice big red delicious apple with the bottom on it. And it's also used, for example, down in the rabbit eyes and blueberry production there. And it's also a tool that helps with frost. If you had a little bit of a slight smattering of frost, it'll help those maternal tissues in that berry continue to grow, develop, and somewhat salvage a crop. You couldn't do anything about 2018. It was just so low. But it does help when you have some light frost events as well. Okay, so we are seeing some nice benefits as far as that way is concerned. And this just gives you an insight into what the trial looked like in 2020. Some nice, and the thing about it, nice consistent berry size as well. You don't see anywhere near as many pinheads. It doesn't give you huge berries, just gives you a more consistent crop with respect to the berry size. So, and when you're looking at a cost of it's still a cost, but it's for a cost of $28, $30 an acre, it does give you a nice consistent yield as well. All right. So just to go through some of what I've already mentioned on pest management product update. So there's a lot of changes that are occurring. We think the Canada situation is always a challenge, but the nice thing about it is we have an excellent system. So we've got good industry support, representation. We try to get to the minor use meetings. The PMUC, so the Pesticide Minor Use Coordinator in the region, Denny, he's very good as well to work with when priorities arise and you figure out how we can proceed forward. And when you compare this system and then also working with the registrants, chemical companies, you can generally get a bit of an idea, and also when working with Health Canada and Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, how the road forward looks with respect to a pest control product. Same doesn't hold true in other export markets, and as I mentioned, some of the challenges that they're facing in Europe. But nonetheless, you need to make sure you check with your end users on whether this product is acceptable to use or not. And there are products with new modes of action that are being assessed. So there are some exciting things in the fungicide, herbicide, insecticide side. But what's important to note, it's a long process. So from the time they'll let it, an agrochemical company will actually release it for assessment outside the company, you're still looking at least a 6-10 year window. And on their part, it's a significant investment. Like it's $250 million to bring many of these pest control products through to market. And so it's going to take a long, careful, sequential process. And what we try to do on our end is, yes, we'll look at it in small screening trials, but then we'll ramp it up and have a look at it on strip plots, and then eventually go to a full field use pattern as well, just to make sure we have all the bugs ironed out of it. Because as you go, it's a huge step when you go from a 4x4 meter plot up to a 60, 100, 200 acre blueberry field. And so there's no room for messing up when you're looking at the use of these products. So that's something else that we try to look at. So out of this, hopefully what I've been able to convey is, look, the wild blueberry sector, it's a challenging one. But it's one that has an excellent story. Every day I wake up and I say, wow, okay, I think we can make some progress today. It's an excellent industry. There's a good story to it. And personally, I do think it has a future. It's going through an awfully tough time right now. But I do believe it has a future. And the one thing that's going to be pivotal to it, and this is where it's nice to hear yesterday, is look, we've gone through COVID and all the challenges that are associated with it, working remotely and doing the video meetings and so on and so forth. But to move forward, the biggest tool that we have are ourselves, right? And so effective communication, coordination, as well as planning and implementation, it's really going to be important as we move forward. And it's something that I know, look, I've got to do a better job on, and the same holds true for other folks as well. And really need to be putting our best foot forward given these challenges. Okay, but given that, it's still an excellent production system with a lot of benefits and a bright future associated with it as well. So with that, I'd like to there's a whole raft of people and organizations that I'd like to acknowledge the support we've received over the years. And I mentioned the Producer Association support on the front end of the presentation. But we wouldn't be able to do anything without the funding support of the public sector, whether it be federal or more locally on the provincial side with the Departments of Agriculture, and then also with the agrochemical sector, and then the Bragg Group of companies who've supported the program now for 28 years. So with that, that finishes the presentation up.
We've got a couple minutes if there's any questions.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
The timing of
Yeah.
and
Okay. Well, I think we better be as inclusive as possible and put on the, from an apiarist or beekeeper perspective.